Hello, and welcome back to Attack on Titan enthusiasts. Perhaps the most unfortunate character in Attack on Titan is Marco Bot. Although Marco is a character who leaves early on in the story, his actions and the words he left behind had a deep impact on the story afterwards. In this video, we're going to be talking about Marco, discussing his death scene in depth and looking through his character profile. Please be aware, this video may contain spoilers. With that out of the way, let's take a look at his character information. Marco Bot. Marco was a member of the 104th class of cadets, the same class as the main character Eren, and graduated with scores high enough to put him in 7th place in his class. He was 16 years old when he graduated, and joined the cadets when he was 13. He's 178 centimeters tall, weighs 70 kilograms, and had black hair and freckles. Although he's not as physically strong as the other main characters, he had very good insight and judgment, and was both calm and realistic. With his kind and gentle personality, he was always considerate and supportive of those around him. When he was a cadet, he hoped to join the military police after graduation to serve the king. John, who also wanted to join the military police, only wanted to do so because he wanted to live a comfortable life in the interior wall. Unlike John, Marco was a serious man committed to the military police and actually had high loyalty towards the king. Because of this, Marco and Jean were basically complete opposites, but they worked together very often. Marco's life and the words he left behind would later greatly influence Jean. Marco had an excellent ability to recognize the character of those around him and knew what everyone was good at. He was very suited to later receive a role in a leadership position. He was also trusted by those around him, with Eren and Jean both saying that if he was leading a squad, they would want to be part of it. However, he thinks that Jean is more suited than he is when it comes to leading others. Marco's death. In Volume 4, Chapter 18, a flashback scene focusing on Marco is shown. In this scene, the 104th cadets are shown in training, and everyone is scrambling to score as many points as possible. Eren notices that when Marco gets in front of a dummy first, he would step back and let others take the points instead. When he asks Marco about why, he says that he knows they need to compete against each other to improve their skills, but they still need to think about actual battles. Against a real Titan, he thought it would be better if he acted as bait while others scored the killing blow. Eren likes the way he's taking this exercise more serious than anyone else, and tells Marco that he's a natural leader. Everyone around him agrees, but Marco says that he thinks John is better suited to commanding others. As he's about to give his reason, the flashback scene ends and Marco's dead body is shown. It was found by Jean and was in the middle of decomposing in the city that had recently been attacked by the Titans. It's a tragic scene. Half of his face and a large chunk of his upper body have been eaten by the Titans. It would be a long time before the truth behind Marco's death was shown. But at this point in the story, it shocked many fans that a supporting character like Marco died alone and unnoticed. Marco died during the chaotic battle against the Titans to try and recapture the Tross district. In the manga, the last time we see Marco alive is in Volume 3, Chapter 13, where Eren transforms into a Titan and uses the large rock to plug the hole in the Tross district's wall. When Armin sees the red smoke signal and runs to Eren, we can see that Marco is still alive. But after that, he doesn't appear in the story until we discover his body. But the anime goes into a little more detail. In his final scene in the anime, Marco turns around and looks as if he had just seen someone. This was probably his reaction to seeing Reiner and Bertolt from a distance. In the beginning of Chapter 18, each of the top-ranked characters are being evaluated by Instructor Shadis. In this scene, there's an evaluation for Connie, who's 8th place, and Sasha, who's 9th. But there's no evaluation given for Marco, who ranks right above them at 7th. This is probably because we were just about to find out that he had died, and so there wasn't a need to show us what he was evaluated as. Despite being the lucky number 7, his luck was not very good. Marco's 3D maneuver gear. Marco's death was too sudden, and all the details about it were a mystery. One of the biggest mysteries was that Marco wasn't wearing his 3D maneuver gear when his body was found. No matter how high-ranked Marco was, he would never take off his gear in an area with Titans. The story continued, brushing over the mystery of why he wasn't wearing his 3D maneuver gear and why the gear had gone missing. Later, Marco's 3D maneuver gear is found after 2 Titans that were test subjects were killed. As an interrogation is being conducted to find out who among the trainees killed the Titans, Armin is standing next to Annie and notices something after looking at her gear. He realized at that moment that Annie's 3D maneuver gear belonged to Marco. Armin had been training with Marco every day and even performed maintenance on his equipment with him. That's why he could notice the familiar patterns in the scratches and dents on her gear. Because of this, he was later able to put all the pieces together and expose Annie as the female Titan. This was one of the ways that even though Marco died early, he still had an important impact on the story. How Marco died. The truth behind Marco's death was finally revealed in Volume 19, Chapter 77. Because his death was first shown in Volume 4, that means that the events that led up to his death were only shown to us 5 years later. During the operation to retake Wall Maria, the events that lead up to Marco's death were shown in what was probably Bertolt's flashback. Eren is trying to plug the hole in the wall with a rock during the operation to recapture the Trost district. Reiner and Bertolt are watching from a distance on the roof when Marco approaches from behind them. Unaware of Marco, Reiner continues to say that if needed, he'll do something with his Titan, and Bertolt seems disappointed that the hole they just made will be blocked. Marco overhears all of this and asks them what they were talking about. They both are very shocked and try to say that it was just a joke. Marco doesn't believe them, but he still smiles and acts like he did. While he's leaving, he thinks about how Eren can turn into a Titan and how the Colossal Titan disappeared immediately after breaking the wall. So he realizes that they're both Titans and they're not on his side. Reiner knows Marco is way too perceptive for an easy excuse like that to work. So they chase him down and catch him. Marco happens to see Annie in the area and screams for help. But once she arrives, he realizes that she's on their side. Reiner says that they can't let Marco live because he overheard their conversation. Titans are closing in, and he tells Annie to remove Marco's 3D maneuver gear. She refuses, but Reiner starts talking about the time she saved Connie and questions her loyalty. He talks her into doing it to prove she's still on their side, and Annie reluctantly removes Marco's 3D maneuver gear and throws it into a nearby building. With nothing he can do, Marco gets eaten by the Titan and dies. Marco's last words. The Marleyan warriors had left Marco to die. They would have killed him themselves if that wouldn't leave evidence. His last words to them were, "Why are you in such a hurry? And we haven't even had a chance to talk about this yet." Because he says this, it's possible that if they had kept Marco alive and just told him everything, a lot less people would have had to die in the future. Marco's last words have a great impact later in the story. In Volume 32, Chapter 127, in order to stop Eren after he's activated the rumbling, those who had previously been enemies joined forces. Here, Annie and Reiner's involvement in Marco's death was revealed for the first time to his friends. Reiner feels guilty and apologizes, making a lot of excuses. John is understandably angry and starts to beat the crap out of him. But Gabby manages to stop him. What brought them together at this point were Marco's dying words. We haven't even had a chance to talk about this yet. John was the closest to Marco, and that's why he agreed to talk things over. Even though he couldn't forgive Reiner, he decided to understand and work with him. And that's how the forces that had been enemies since the beginning of the story set aside their differences and worked together. Marco had told Jean before his death that he would make a better leader not because he was strong, but because he wasn't strong and could understand the feelings of the weak. That's how he was able to understand Reiner's mental weakness at that time and didn't try to take revenge. Reiner's split personality. Reiner, Bertolt, and Annie were all responsible for Marco's death, even though it was a Titan that actually killed him. As Marleyan warriors, you could say that they really didn't have much of a choice. Even so, that didn't stop them from feeling guilt over what they had done. Annie and Bertolt were crying as they watched Marco being eaten by the Titan, but Reiner was so disturbed by it that he asks why Marco is being eaten. I'm guessing he couldn't bring himself to accept what he had done, and he was so shocked by his own actions, he forgot he was the one that did it. This was the moment that his personality was completely split between the lying and cheating Marleyan warrior and the soldier that loves his friends. The beginning of what Japanese fans call Menheraina. Why Marco died. Marco left the story very early after being considered a major character. According to an interview done with the author, Isayama, he said that he originally didn't plan for Marco to go so soon, but he ended up dying early because he didn't stand out enough as a character. Marco's main character traits were that he was a modest, quiet, sincere, serious, calm, and wise person who was able to notice things others couldn't, and that he was suited for a leadership role. Some readers might think that this is enough to stand out as a character, but there's Armin, who's one of the main characters, who is serious and is also very suitable for a leadership role. Also, Armin's personality was very similar to Marco's. Marlowe from the military police also appears in the middle of the story, and they're very similar too, in that they both have black hair and are serious characters. Even their names are similar, and it might have been difficult to tell the difference between Marco and Marlowe later on. However, the impact that Marco's death has on the story makes him a very important character overall. If he had survived, he might have become an extremely strong leader following Erwin's example. After Reiner cut Marco's life short, he became a character that couldn't die even though he wanted to. Since Marco's death highly contributed to Reiner's split personality, it's almost like he was made to suffer through a long life to make up for Marco's early death. Alright, that's all we have on Marco this time. If you have any other interesting thoughts on Marco, please feel free to share them in the comments. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again in the next video.